Howdy, this is Lemmy with RevZilla TV, here to talk to you today about how to install a motorcycle muffler. So before you click away because you see we have a German ADV bike up here, you should probably know we're using this as a representational bike for this video. No matter what kind of bike you're on, the act of putting a muffler on really is fairly similar, with the exception of those of you guys rocking undertail exhausts. Whether you're on a street glide or you're on a CBR or perhaps you're on an off-road machine, putting a new pipe on your bike really is a very similar act across all of those different types of motorcycles. You may be wondering, why should I put an aftermarket muffler onto my motorcycle? It's a great question, and there's a lot of different answers. If you've wrecked or rusted out your original muffler, it can be far cheaper to go with an aftermarket option than to try and replace it with a like OEM muffler, if that muffler is even made anymore. Perhaps more importantly, for a lot of you guys, it's going to look a whole lot better. And for those of you who get mufflers made out of more exotic materials like titanium or perhaps incorporating carbon fiber, you're also going to realize a weight savings. That can help your bike go a little faster. However, I think the main reason everybody puts a muffler onto their motorcycle is because it just sounds awesome. Here, check this out. You can listen to our stock F800 here versus to the F800 after we give it the ZLA treatment. Give a listen. As you can hear, it's a pretty dramatic difference in the tone of that motorcycle. The timbre really changes. I tend to really like the sound of aftermarket exhausts, and judging by all these things we move out the door, I'm not alone. Now you should know this is probably something you can attack on your own with a minimal of mechanical experience. This is a one bearder on our BSD, our beard scale of difficulty. Putting a muffler onto your bike is something you're not going to need very many special tools for. As long as you have a good hand tool kit, you should be able to do this in your garage, and a lift is absolutely unnecessary. We have ours up on the lift just to give our camera guy a better shot at this thing so you can see exactly what it is I'm about to do. When you're removing a muffler from a bike and replacing it with an aftermarket one, directions are important. You want to have a factory service manual handy, and you definitely want to have the instructions handy for your aftermarket muffler. Sometimes the installation can differ a little bit from what you are taking off of the motorcycle. So it's important to read all the way through both of those particular pieces of literature before you get cracking on the job. But still, you shouldn't be scared. As I said, it is really, really simple. What we're going to wind up doing is loosening up the joint, the connection between the muffler and the head pipe. Then we're going to get the muffler bracket loosened up, the thing that actually supports the weight of the muffler. And from there, we can actually move the muffler off of the motorcycle. Installation is just the reverse of that process. So let's get cracking right now. So the only special tool you're going to see me use up here is an exhaust spring hook tool, and you don't need one of these. I've fabricated lots of these over the years. Heating up some old tools and bending something over, even just good thick wire bent in a vise will get the job done. However, it's a super inexpensive tool, and it does make this job particularly easy. Now we're going to be removing spring hooks on here. Your interface between your muffler and your head pipe may vary. Some of you may just have a standard band clamp there. Some of you might have a gasketed flange. And again, those of you, especially on sport bikes, may have a spring style exhaust like this. So the first thing we want to do is just unhook these springs or loosen up the bolts for the gasket and flange. Regardless of what it is that you have on your motorcycle, it's going to be a very simple way to split these two pieces up. Let's start. I'm going to get under here and hook this spring with the tool. And I'm just going to give a little yank, and that thing will come free just like that. Let's get that one out of the way, and I'm going to perform the same procedure up on the top spring. Hook it and get it out of the way. It's that easy. We're ready to get this thing apart as soon as we get that muffler bracket out of our way. I'm going to set that down and switch over to the tool I need for the muffler bracket. On this particular bike, the muffler bracket is held in place with a Torx bolt. You may find something else there, but know that this bracket's job is to hold up the weight of this muffler. So it's important when you're loosening this puppy up to support the weight of the muffler to make sure that it doesn't bang into anything. As this loosens, it will start to flop around a little bit. If you're not careful, you can scratch up bodywork or perhaps ding or dent something on your motorcycle that you don't want dented or dinged. So I'm going to remove this puppy, and this is about free. I have the fastener out, and I'm going to remove it and save it and retain it. I'm carefully going to set this muffler down so I don't lose it. Now at this point, I'd like to tell you, this is called a slip-on muffler. It's the name of these. But the name's a bit of a misnomer. Sometimes these don't always slip on and slip off. Sometimes you have to put a little bit of gorilla strength into it to get this muffler free of the head pipe. But you don't want to overdo it. Keep in mind, the head pipe is still attached to your engine. You don't want to disturb any gaskets, and you certainly don't want to break anything on your cylinder head. This one came right off. Let's get this heavy hunk of junk out of here, and we're going to show you how the install process goes. But first, my favorite part of this, lubrication. For the mechanic, of course. What? I'm on a diet. Alrighty, it's time to install this muffler. I've put the bracket onto this muffler. Now you may face something similar on your bike, you may not. You may have a band style clamp. If you do, be careful you don't mar the finish of the muffler. Those of you on Harleys, you may have something that's actually welded right to the can itself. It's going to differ a little bit. Read your instructions. There's definitely going to be something on there about it. So I'm going to slide this back into place on our motorcycle here. And I'm going to slide this onto the head pipe really delicately. There's no need to force anything. If you're forcing something, you're probably doing something that's not 100% correct. So we want to get this about lined up to where it's finally going to live. Reading those aftermarket muffler instructions is important because you may be using different hardware, different bracketry, a different setup than the factory one does. In this case, Remus actually includes this little O-ring that needs to actually be included so it's going to keep the muffler at the correct spacing. So we're going to sneak that thing into place right here. And once that's done, Remus has us use the factory bolt to retain this. So we're going to guide that into place. And as we do that, finger thread things. As I had said, install things loosely. There's no point beating the ever-living tar out of everything because you're going to have to go back and adjust things, and you may not have an exact fit. This will keep things from getting broken or destroyed either during the installation or later on down the road. This is now loosely installed. I'm going to put the springs onto this baby. Installation of the springs really is just as easy as removing them was. We're going to take one end of the spring, put it onto the spring hook on the head pipe. I'm going to take the tool and just drop the other end of this thing onto the muffler side of things. Free my tool, it's that simple. I'm going to repeat the process for the bottom. Hook here on the head pipe side of things, and then I'm going to grab my tool, take the other side hook, put just a little bit of pulling pressure on it, line it up, and guide it home. It's that easy. At this point now, everything's looking pretty solid up here. I just need to snug this thing down. Now I'm using a Torx head fastener here because that's what BMW has. You want to use either your factory service manual specs or whatever specs the muffler manufacturer has given you for torque in case they supersede what BMW has said on this particular motorcycle. I've done a few of these. I'm feeling fairly confident I'm not going to strip anything out, so I'm going to ignore the torque spec on this. Do as I say, not as I do. This is now installation complete. You may be very tempted at this point to fire up the bike and listen to the sweet, sweet music this muffler is going to sing for you. Don't do it. Avoid the temptation. We need to get this muffler wiped down. I was handling this and I have oil all over my hands. The problem is that stuff gets onto the surface of the muffler. So we need to really diligently wipe that stuff off here. Otherwise, when the muffler gets hot for the first time, those oils can burn in. If you're not sure if you did a good job, go back and do it again. You're going to feel terrible if you keep looking at the same burn mark from your dirty hands every time you go out to your muffler. Pay special attention to the end caps too. Be really careful with them. Make sure you have a soft cloth with no dirt or grit embedded in them, especially if you're working on something like this carbon fiber here. This stuff's very easily marred. Take good care of it and your exhaust will look nice during the installation. There's one more step before we get this thing cooking. We need to check for leaks. What I like to do is physically take my hands and put them around the actual exhaust itself once I fire the bike up and ascertain if there's no leaks coming from the joint that I just disturbed. Be careful when you do this though. Exhausts get hot really quick. This stuff happens. Be careful when you're working around the exhaust on a motorcycle. At that point, once everything is leak-free, you are set to go ride. You can enjoy the music coming out of your new motorcycle. So there's one last item of note. We have lots and lots of people write us and call us each day asking us about their DB killer. So the DB killer, especially on can style mufflers, is something that can be put into the end of the muffler to keep the noise quiet. Some exhausts ship with them, some don't. Some are removable, some are not. It really depends on what exhaust you have and what bike you have. The DB killer's job is to sort of keep things hushed down. Give a listen to our F800 with the DB killer in versus the DB killer out. There's a pretty big difference. Now I know some of you are listening to this on computer speakers or perhaps your headphones, but trust me, on the street, there's a huge difference, especially to your ears. It can be a lot louder without the dB killer. However, we know a lot of you guys want all the bang for the buck that you paid for. Let me show you how to pop one out real quickly. This particular one is held in with just a small set screw. So I'm going to use this Allen key to loosen it up and remove the set screw. After I back this set screw out of here, I'm going to use my exhaust spring tool again to grab a hold of this and slide it out. I also like to use a rag when I'm doing this. Again, I want to be really careful of this delicate carbon fiber end tip. So I'm going to pop this thing out of here using my exhaust spring hook tool again and just start easing this thing out. As you can see, I have it loosened up right now. So from here, I'm going to set my tool down, grab this dB killer, and carefully slide it back out of here. Now you don't want to mar this thing up. Don't use pliers or beat on this thing getting it out, because you might wind up having trouble getting this back into the motorcycle. Now most of you are saying, I'm not going to put it back in. You might, for a couple of different reasons. It might turn out that this thing is actually a little bit too loud for your liking. If that's the case, you can always put it back in. I'm one of those kind of riders who will actually bounce between in and out. My wife has very sensitive ears and I don't like to hurt them, so I'll put a dB killer in for her. I'll also put them in if I'm going on a longer ride. I don't like hearing the exhaust droning back and forth. The third and final reason I will sometimes put a dB killer in is if in case I'm going into a neighborhood or I know I'm going to be up late, I don't really want to irritate the neighbors too much. They might not like my new pipe as much as I do. That's really about the last thing you'd have to do with respect to installation of an aftermarket muffler. As you can see, it really is a pretty simple task, one I know you can tackle yourself. Hopefully after having watched this video, you feel confident in doing so. If you need any help, get in touch with me in the comments section down below, whether you're on Common Tread or YouTube, and I will do my best to help you. If you need absolutely immediate assistance, get in touch with one of the gear geeks, cs@RevZilla.com, or you can also give us a phone call, 877-792-9455. I'm Lemmy, I'm out of here.